so VHS 99, is the latest entry in the VHS horror anthology franchise. Now, I've kind of gone back and forth on the VHS franchise. The first film I found very underwhelming. A lot of the horror shorts just didn't work for me. It felt like they were good ideas, but they didn't have like the best execution. But then you got to VHS 2, and that's still like top tier, like one of my favorite horror films ever made, just because of the astounding talent and the directors assembled, just fantastic talent. Like I brought this up in one of the other reviews, but the Kids versus Aliens is an expansion of one of the shorts from that anthology. So going back and forth, especially since, like the film after that one, VHS Viral, did nothing for me. So like great directors assembled, but the shorts did nothing for me. But that being said, I'm always up for horror anthologies, and especially one that wants to use like the VHS format as a framing for. Yeah, let's throw them up. Let's see what they can do. And actually, this entry is probably up there with VHS 2. Just because I love the concept, I love the framework here. The directors do an amazing job, and the shorts just run like a whole gamut of different tones and creativity with what you can do with the material and the era. So I believe like the next entry in VHS is also going to have this format. All the entries here are based on the year 1999. So VHS tapes from the very late 90s. And there's a lot of interesting stuff they find to do with this material. The first short, called Shredding, is kind of like a great use of kind of like, like when bands would like film themselves and doing like crazy stunts and stuff like that and pulling pranks, with like embracing like kind of like the Jackass era when everyone was obsessing with like, riding around in shopping carts and filming themselves, playing instruments. So yeah, I kind of dug like the vibe of Shredding. But the whole deal with Shredding is that it's a band that wants to film themselves playing where there was an urban legend about a band that was murdered by a supernatural force. So they go there and they kind of reenact like the situation, kind of like a Bloody Mary type thing. And then the creepy stuff from beyond starts happening when they do the Bloody Mary stuff, because that's what happens in VHS film. And I love the creative use here of like taping over stuff. Like I love like how they transition between what happened to the previous band and what the current band is trying to do. And then of course you have like the creepy VHS effects here, where like characters will like they'll stutter, they'll have like the static going, and you're just not quite sure where characters are in the scene, and you have like that creepy effect where it's like almost like the tape is alive, where it's like certain characters are affected by what is being filmed in that moment, which has always kind of been a little bit of like a hallmark of like the VHS films, and I love that it's used to great use here, just because the whole vibe of this band called they're called Rack, and it's an acronym for, not for like any statement, but for like the band members, because like the band is, it's Rachel, Anchor, I believe, and Chris and Caleb. Together we are Rack. So it's absurd, but just like the whole. And this is like the best aspect of VHS 99, is that it feels like characters who are within that element, where there's a hangout element to it. Because like for setting up these characters where it's like kind of like the found footage format where they're recording with a VHS camera, you have to make it believable that they're just kind of like hanging out and just like, hey, we're going to go down here in the darkness, we're going to have fun, we're going to reenact this. And it works. It works surprisingly well. So it was off to a great start, and I was looking forward to what came next. So the next short is a bit more of like a standard one. This is probably, at least for me, this was probably the weakest one, but the weakest entry is still like a lot of fun. So this is Suicide Bid, And it's basically about a college freshman who's going through a hazing ritual where she has to spend the night in a coffin that gets put in the ground. And the prank that the sorority is counting on is that, they're gonna unleash like some spiders in there, and she's gonna be like, oh, gross, spiders, and I'm trapped. And that alone is creepy. And the fact that it's being filmed is creepy enough. But then the undead come into the picture, and all of a sudden it's not just one person in a coffin, and it gets creepier from there. And it's a very simple concept. And I guess I don't so much dig the atmosphere here as much as I dig like the simplicity of having a person trapped inside a coffin. Like, because like in terms of like a found footage film like that, you are going to draw comparisons to other films where people have been trapped in a coffin, with stuff like Buried and to a sci-fi extent, a film like Oxygen, that kind of like bottle film. So on a simplicity level, I kind of like the idea. And the execution is not half bad. I like the fact that like kind of they cut away just at the perfect point where the supernatural forces are going to enter the coffin and kind of like drag the next person down with them, and how there's like a deal you have to make with the dead in order to survive the night. So yeah, not a bad short for and let that sink in. Like this was probably my least favorite short, and it's still pretty good. The next short is probably going to be a lot of people's favorites, especially those who grew up watching Nickelodeon. So the short is called Aussies Dungeon. It's directed by Flying Lotus, and this entry, it's in two parts. So the first part, it starts off on the taping of like a Double Dare show. So if you might remember, so like the 90s kids will get this, but Double Dare was like a game show that had physical challenges where you would you do stuff where you'd have to get your hands in slime, and you'd go through giant mouths and pick boogers out of giant noses and get pies in the face, all this gross physical challenge stuff. And this film kind of leans into kind of like the darkness behind that concept, because some people have done exposés on these game shows about how there would be like, they'd have to film so many episodes a day. There'd be accidents on sets. It would smell bad with all of like the materials that they would have to use for like the, like the food and stuff like that. And this is like a common thing with like game shows in general. Like game shows would film like tons of episodes, like 2 to 3 episodes a day. And especially if those shows involve like food with stuff like supermarket sweeps, they'd smell horrible on the set. And this entry kind of leans into it by having this game show called Aussies Dungeon. And you can tell that there's like a bias with like the host here. Like the host is meant to be obnoxious and over the top, which is very par for the course for like those early 90s game shows. And yeah, like he addresses this finalist who's from Detroit, this black girl from Detroit, and he obviously looks down on this kid. He's not hoping that this kid will win. And at one point, the kid has an accident on set, and the accident involves her leg being brutalized. I believe like you can see like the bone coming out. There's like blood everywhere, and it feels like this is like a blooper tape, or like a tape that they weren't going to show anyone, because this would not make it on the air. You would not show this. But then, like I said, that's the first part. The second part cuts to 1999, in which the family of this child tracks down the host, kidnaps him, takes off his clothes, and forces him to go through an obstacle course, but in kind of like an obstacle course that'd be more akin to like Jigsaw. So it's like, oh, you like torturing our daughter? Well, here, you can go through this obstacle course that involves poison and poop. So let's see if you survive that. And it gets grotesque from there, and you start questioning like, how much torture should befall this guy, and it gets even weirder when there's a paranormal element thrown in there with the dark secret of Aussies Dungeon in general. So yeah, it's definitely one of the more gruesome entries. uh, but yeah, like for touching on like that Double Dare aspect, that it was bizarre and actually surprisingly a lot of fun. The next short is called The Gawkers, and it's about a group of teenage boys who are trying to hack the webcam of their next door neighbor, who is a hot girl that they're trying to spy on. And much like Shredding, this is a film where they try to build up the vibe as best they can, like make the characters feel relatable. It feels like they try a little bit too hard in some parts. Like at one point, they bring up the fact that someone is like talking about the Millennium Bug and how they think that all the networks are going to go down. And that kind of made me think that that's where this entry was going to go, because like their whole deal is they got to hack a webcam. And my thought was, oh, great. Is it going to be like the computer's going to come to life, or like the Y2K bug's going to infect them? But no. As it turns out, there's a monster that's thrown into the mix that turns this into a slasher film. And I guess you're like, for those who haven't seen it, I don't want to spoil it, just because like the monster that they do encounter is not one you would expect. Like it thematically, it fits for this short, but it's not one that you would expect for like a horror film in suburbia. So it was a nice touch. It's creepy because it's a bunch of kids who want to spy on a woman who's undressing, but they get their comeuppance. Karma comes back to bite them in the ass. You don't feel too bad that they get gored and tortured by the monster who comes for them. So there's that. And then finally, we have the last entry, which is honestly kind of rides a great balance between like dark occultish stuff and comedy. So the entry is called To Hell and Back, and this one takes place on New Year's Eve of 1999, in which there's a dark ritual for like a coven of witches, in which they want to when they basically want to like make someone into a vessel that'll trap a demon so that they can kill the demon. Unfortunately, during the ceremony, the two guys filming it who thought like, oh man, they're gonna sacrifice something. This is gonna be a New Year's ritual. We gotta film this. They accidentally, during the ceremony, get sent to hell. And they try to find their way out of hell while filming it the entire time, while trying to like, be there for each other and make sure that both of them get out alive. And it's it would sound like this is like the darkest short, but it actually finds a decent amount of comedy in it, especially like the ultimate punchline of when they finally do find their way out of hell. But also because of like the great performance of I'm trying to remember like the demon they encounter here. Like she's such a what's it, Mabel. They encounter like this creature in hell called Mabel, who's kind of like the best way to describe her is like she's like a female Gollum, where she's like yes, I will take you to the to the next stage. And she kind of has like the wittiest lines. She's like I know my way around hell. Come on guys, quit messing around with the demons. Don't stare at the ones who are eating guts. It's fine. And she's so adorable. She's so much fun, and I like the fact that like the guys are overreacting to her. It's like, why do you find this normal? She's like, I live here, this is my jam. I don't know what's with you guys. So yeah, those are all the shorts within the VHS entry. Shredding, Suicide Bid, Aussies Dungeon, The Gawkers, and To Hell and Back. And honestly, all 5 of them are really well assembled. I like the way they're all set up. Even like the they have like a little bit of an interstitial here where there's like a little bit of like a small film with like army soldiers going on. It's weird, and I don't feel like it quite works, but it's not used as like the direct framing device for all of this. So which is a smart call, because like I have a feeling if they expanded on that bit too much, it would kind of lessen the film. Because honestly, the shorts on their own is just like a straight, like here's this story, this story, this story, this story. They all work. Just amazing work from like the directors here, which I should definitely mention. So for like To Hell and Back, it was Vanessa and Joseph Winter. For the Gawkers, it was directed by Tyler McIntyre. Aussies Dungeon was directed by Flying Lotus. Suicide Beta was directed by Johannes Roberts, and Shredding was by Maggie Levin. They have all done a fantastic job here. I loved, even like Suicide Bit I wasn't as big on, but like I still appreciated the simplicity and the atmosphere. So in general, I really loved VHS 99, and it's making me look forward to like more entries. Like they did a similar thing with VHS 94. And I believe there's another one coming out called VHS. I believe it goes back in like the 1980s. It's called VHS 85. So yeah, the VHS anthology, it kind of has its hills and valleys, but this is definitely one of the hills and definitely one of the entries that you should check out. Like if you were to ask me like which films from the VHS saga you should watch, you should definitely watch VHS 2. That's still the gold standard for me. But immediately after that, if you want to ride that high and still have that kind of that thrill of using VHS format for weird and creative horror films, VHS 99 is the way to go.